Something is happening on the north side, and if you actually study the pattern here instead of just reading headlines, it starts to look very different from a normal, quiet post-deadline week. In the span of about 48 hours, one front office made move after move after move. Four separate trades, a fifth deal that came agonizingly close to happening, and a roster that suddenly looks completely reshaped. And now, insiders, beat writers, and sharp fans are all circling the same question. Is this actually finished? Or is there still one more move loading behind the scenes? I'm not just going to read you the headlines on this one. I'm going to break down exactly what these moves mean, why the front office made the choices it made, and where I think this roster goes from here. Quick word before we dive in. If you're new to this channel, welcome. This isn't a channel that just reads you tweets. I want to actually break things down like an analyst would. The what, the why, and the what's next. And then I want your read on it too. So if that's the kind of Cubs coverage you're looking for, and you consider yourself a real, die-hard fan of this team, do me a favor and hit subscribe right now. This channel grows because fans like you decide to back it early. And in return, I promise you the most complete, most honest breakdown of this team anywhere on this platform. Drop a comment too. Tell me how long you've been a Cubs fan and where you're watching from. I read every single one, and I want to know exactly who's in this with me. All right, let's actually break this down properly, starting with the what happened. Heading into deadline day, the diagnosis on this team was pretty clear if you were paying attention to the underlying numbers. This wasn't a lineup problem. It was a depth of pitching problem. Cade Horton was done for the year. Justin Steele was still working his way back from a major arm procedure. And across the whole staff, this team had already absorbed 30 different injured list stints, 26 of them pitchers. When you see a number like that, as an analyst, you know exactly what a front office has to prioritize: bodies, and specifically, reliable, healthy arms. So look at how they actually attacked it. First, a hard-throwing reliever from the Angels, someone who touches the upper 90s and is controllable all the way through the end of the decade. That's not just a rental, that's a bullpen piece for years. Then, a controllable left-handed starter from the Marlins, adding rotation depth without giving up a top piece of the farm system. And then, within hours of each other, two bigger swings. A proven, postseason tested right-handed starter landed from the Blue Jays, followed immediately by a package deal with the Mets, bringing back a hard-throwing, closer-caliber reliever and an experienced outfielder bat. 4 trades. 1 front office. Under 48 hours. Now here's the analyst read on that pattern, because the sequencing actually tells you something. Teams that make one big trade are usually just filling one hole. Teams that make 4 trades across starting pitching, relief pitching, and bench depth in 2 days are doing something different. They're not patching, they're rebuilding a whole formula for October. That's a front office that looked at their injury report, looked at the standings, and decided the version of this roster that existed in July was not the version they wanted walking into September, and the early results back that read up. Just days after these new arms started arriving, this team turned around and detonated on the reigning back-to-back World Series champions, smashing 4 home runs in a single game to open a series against the Dodgers, one of the most loaded rosters in the entire sport. As an analyst, I don't love reading too much into one explosive game, small sample size, and all that. But combined with the roster overhaul, it's a real early signal that the depth is doing exactly what it was supposed to do. So now, the actual question of this video. Why do so many people think there's still more coming? Point 1, and I think this is the strongest piece of evidence. There was reportedly a 5th deal, a young, controllable left-handed starter that got close enough that some outlets briefly reported it as basically finalized before it collapsed entirely. In my experience, breaking down front offices, a near miss like that rarely just disappears. It tells you the front office was willing to go further than the 4 completed trades suggest, and that kind of appetite tends to resurface, whether that's later this month through revocable waivers or as a target again down the road. Point 2. The farm system is bubbling right now in a way that creates its own momentum. There's a switch-hitting catching prospect who's rocketed from high A to triple A this season, hitting for legitimate power with elite defense, forcing his way into a long-term conversation behind the plate. There's a versatile young infielder-outfielder who's already up in the majors, hitting safely in 6 straight games to open the second half. And here's the analyst detail that matters most. Rival front offices have specifically been calling about these exact players, treating them as real trade chips. When other teams are calling about your prospects unprompted, that's usually a sign your own front office is going to keep listening too, not just this week, but through the rest of the season. Point 3. Health timing. There's a hard-throwing reliever who's been out since mid-June, now progressing toward live batting practice and a minor league rehab assignment. When a roster gets a talented arm back for free, off the injured list, right as it's already deeper than it was a week ago, that typically forces a corresponding roster move. Somebody gets optioned, somebody gets DFA'd, or somebody becomes newly available in a trade to clear a spot. That's not speculation. That's just how 40-man roster math works in August. Put all three of those together, and here's my actual analysis, not just the fan speculation. I think the something bigger is coming theory is really about two different things getting bundled together, and it's worth separating them. 1. Another headline-level blockbuster trade on the scale of what we just saw is unlikely in the next few days, simply because the traditional deadline has closed and the trade market genuinely thins out afterward. 2. Continued roster reshaping. Waiver trades, call-ups, corresponding moves, maybe even a smaller depth trade. That part is extremely likely, and honestly, almost guaranteed given everything we just walked through. So here's my honest take, the kind of opinion I try to give you straight instead of just hyping things up. I think this front office got exactly what it wanted at the deadline. They diagnosed a pitching problem correctly, and they attacked it aggressively across 4 separate trades instead of making one flashy move and calling it a day. I respect that approach because it spreads the risk instead of betting everything on one arm staying healthy. I do think the near miss on that 5th starter shows real intent that hasn't fully played out yet. And with prospects surging and injured pitchers returning throughout August, I'd be surprised if this exact roster is still the final version by the time the postseason race tightens up in September. Now I want to hear the analyst in you. Based on everything we just broke down, 4 trades in 48 hours, a near miss on a 5th, prospects knocking on the door, and injured arms returning. Do you think this front office is genuinely finished shaping the roster? Or is there real substance behind the something bigger is coming chatter? I'm not asking for a gut reaction here. I want your actual reasoning in the comments, because some of the best analysis on this channel comes from you all, not just me. And look, if this kind of breakdown is exactly what you've been looking for, a channel that treats you like someone who actually understands the